parties involved are deep in discussions, hoping to bring the show back to ABC. While there are many in support of the suspension and cancellation of the popular show, there are also protests from actors, celebrities and media outlets, with many expressing concern over free speech and political landscape of the United States. Amid the growing controversy, international media is also taking note, covering the suspension of a high-profile case of pressure on US late-night programs. Let's now take a look at how the foreign media is covering the controversy. Let's have a look at the Moscow Times first, where it reported the incident by putting out a headline stating, quote, "For Russians like me, silencing Jimmy Kimmel looks dangerously familiar." BBC, it shares the same notion by saying the US TV hosts back Jimmy Kimmel as Trump threatens networks. Now let's move over to Fox News, famously pro-Trump. It further reported saying ex-ABC host Bill Maher emphasizes with Jimmy Kimmel, says network stands for always be caving. Now we move over to France 24, where it puts out on their page stating media giants having to weigh editorial independence versus commercial ambitions. Now we move on to Euro News, where they have claimed that Donald Trump is reshaping the US media landscape after Kimmel. Who's next? Now we move over to Arab News, who took a stance. They are stating that Trump says his negative media coverage is illegal. Trump himself faced a setback in his personal anti-media crusade, with a federal judge issuing a scathing ruling and tossing out his $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. NewsX World's headline reads, "What did Jimmy Kimmel really say about Charlie Kirk?" ABC suspends comedian as MAGA erupts and Trump celebrates. Okay, we're now once again joined by Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a China strategist, and he joins us to discuss this ongoing situation in the United States. Andrew, we've just read out some different takes from media all over the world, all give their 2 pence on their take in regards to this situation with the Jimmy Kimmel show being pulled after comments he made on the death of Charlie Kirk. What are your thoughts on the FCC's stance on this, and then ABC's ultimate decision to pull the plug on Jimmy Kimmel's show?
I think that the Charlie Kirk actually was a very brilliant guy. Now, I recently listened to his talk at the Oxford Union. He was obviously very articulate, and for a long time he was a staunch supporter of this kind of public sentiment that the United States needed to grow its strength, both internally and internationally. And in other words, trying to make the country great again. I mean, that's why he had been a staunch supporter of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again campaign. And he started with a very successful media host, and also he spoke on various forums. But I've also listened to one or two of his more recent performances on stage. Although he obviously is a brilliant man, and in spite of the fact that according to him, he didn't even have a university degree, but the way he conducted himself amongst the intellectuals is quite impressive. Yeah.
Yes, Andrew, I guess what I'm asking, essentially what happened was, after his assassination, is Jimmy Kimmel, a famous late show talk host in America, made some comments in his opening monologue about his death, criticizing President Donald Trump and his reaction, which after that led to Jimmy Kimmel's show being taken off the air. Now, this was after pressure from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which is appointed by Brendan Carr, who is appointed by Donald Trump. Now, people are saying that this is the Trump administration. Critics are saying that this is the Trump administration restricting free speech. Now, some and others are showing that Donald Trump is showing authoritarian tendencies here. Do you agree with that?
Well, naturally, you can see that President Trump, since he won back the White House, and even before then, he had been he had a very, very strong character, always believed that he was right, and then he prided himself as the greatest deal maker, and he wanted to make America great again. And he had a great following, winning the White House twice. Obviously, he thought that he knew what to do, and he paid sometimes very little attention to his main advisors. I mean, look at his first term. A lot of the top advisors were either sacked relatively in short shrift, including his Secretary of State, and various other very senior people around him. So obviously he didn't want to listen even to his most experienced advisors, and least of all, other media channels whose views do not necessarily agree with his. And of course that the United States has been priding itself as the bastion of free speech, but on the other hand, Trump doesn't believe that there is such thing as a completely free speech. He believes that certain divergent views, for example, on racial, on sex equality, and also the more inclusive kind of DIE, diversity, equality, and inclusiveness, as something which is not in Americans' best interest. And that's why in this project, so-called Project 2025, when he was in preparing for this campaign to win back the White House, there was already a very detailed project outlining how it's going to gut through the whole kind of narrative in the American society, both focusing on American sort of manliness, as it were, and also what I believe is the only true Christian values,
Okay.
and disregarding sort of other views.
Andrew.
So, but in the process, it's destroying America's credibility as the bastion of free speech.
Yes.
But
Okay.
but on the altar of what he perceived as making America great again, he doesn't care that much about what would be the cost to America.